Welcome back to Sports Gambling Daily. My name is Jared. We got Joe over here, and we got a special guest. We have David Bearman from ESPN. He is the Deputy Director of Sports Betting. Really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us today, David.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
Welcome.
So why don't you let us know a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Like as you mentioned at the top, Deputy Editor of Sports Betting at ESPN. I spent 14 years in our stats information department at ESPN. Been there since 2005. Just celebrated 15 total years. But the first 14 were stats information, providing information, stats, and research for the live shows, and went up through managing the department, including the bottom line and our stats video department. And now I started up our little gambling content division at ESPN back in 2014, where we were producing databases and content for shows around gambling. But of course, nobody was listening because gambling is illegal. And we were just hoping at some point we would build enough content that when the Supreme Court flipped the switch, that we'd be sitting there nice and pretty, ready to roll. And that they did. So about 6 months after that happened, I took a job as Deputy Editor of Sports Betting for ESPN.com. And I helped with the Daily Wager show, helped launch that back a year ago in March, as well as oversee our website. So if you go to ESPN Chalk is our gambling website, where we have content every single day talking about picks, games, when there are games, and everything else that has to do with sports betting in the country and internationally. And I oversee that content for .com and work hand in hand with the TV guys.
So that's incredible. So you saw the vision back in 2014, huh?
Back in 2014, we decided, like, hey, FS1 just launched. That was the new baby out there. And I said, well, they're going to do things differently. So what can we do differently? And we said, hey, let's get a group of people here that like sports betting, that, aren't going to be secretive about it like everybody else is, tongue-in-cheek references on air. And that's where we were at the time. Like, you have, for every Brent Musburger who says something about the desert or something about the number, you have everybody else who tongue-in-cheek will say, well, that might mean something. That's where we were in 2014. And a group of us that either participated or were very knowledgeable about sports betting said, hey, we got to educate people, because at some point sports betting is going to take off. And 2014 does sound like a long time ago. We did it wasn't just me. It was a whole bunch of people at work that had the vision that sometime down the line this will explode, as long as eventually will be legal. Obviously, that happened in 2018 with the repeal of PASPA. But by then, we already had a design for a show. We had already met with various companies across the country for sports betting content. Mm-hmm. We had purchased databases. And the minute they said go, all of a sudden, instead of SportsCenter or other shows saying, yeah, that backdoor touchdown at the end of the game that may have mattered, all of a sudden it matters. It went over the total. Now, we're not all the way where other people are, where we're talking about in-game betting and live stuff, which we'll get to later on in the podcast. But we now have a live TV show that's on, well, pre-coronavirus, it was on 6 days a week during football season. It's still on YouTube and Twitter, Daily Wager. And we have a full website, ESPN Chalk, that gives you analysis every single day. We have pieces from news from David Purdom. We have best bets from the likes of Doug Kazarian and Preston Johnson and Joe Fortenbaugh, Anita Marks, a lot of people that participate in that. And we're there every single day thinking of ways to produce betting content and get it out there. Now we have a deal with Caesars, where they're our official odds provider at ESPN. So you see Caesars all over our telecasts and our broadcasts. And, we built it starting in 2014 as an idea. And then when 2018 happened, we really stepped on the pedal.
That's awesome. I mean, Joe, I'm sure you remember, prior to 2018, it was kind of a dirty subject to talk about sports betting ever.
Yeah, it was taboo, and it still kind of is. What Dave said right now makes a lot of sense. And that's why I was going to ask you a question. That did you guys get a lot of pushback from the big executives at ESPN stating, we're no? And then after obviously the repeal, they're like, okay, let's get it, because they see the money involved. I mean, do you get that?
I would say that there was definitely a difference between pre-2018 and post-2018. Mm-hmm. I would say that by the time the May ruling in 2018 came, and by then you were pretty confident it was going to happen. It had been on the docket since October and postponed November, December, January, kept getting postponed. Sure. Everybody was expecting it to be overturned. So I think if you were to go back into maybe, the middle of 2017 is when we had spent about 3 years pushing the content, and it was very taboo at the beginning. Nobody wanted to do it.
Sure.
Even within my own department, I had people that we had overseeing the digital side of things with the Stats and Info Twitter feed, which is a godsend right now for information.
Yeah.
They didn't even want to tweet out gambling information. So
Wow.
I would say that the tide shifted a little bit in 2017, and there was, I wouldn't say it was necessarily from the executive level, because a lot of the executive level people that I know were fans of the content, but we are owned by Disney. We are a family-oriented company, and
Sure.
it was illegal in 49 states. So as long as it's illegal in 49 states, I don't blame anybody at the executive
Sure.
or any level to say, hey, like, we don't want to deal with that right now. But we also showed them that there were ways to do it without it coming across as a degenerate taboo type thing. And then once it was repealed, again, you only had one state, so now it's 2 states. Little by little, we're now in 18 of them.
Yeah.
But it took a long time. But at that point, they're like, listen, it's going to be legal in more and more states. So now me and a couple of my buddies had been teaching classes at ESPN. It was 101 classes on as easy and dumbed down as what is a money line and what is a point spread, all the way to comparing it to fantasy sports and how, hey, everybody talks about that backdoor touchdown that won you your fantasy league. It also covered the point spread.
Sure.
Now it's universally accepted. I wouldn't say it's on the same plane as fantasy, but it's getting there.
Oh yeah, I mean they go hand in hand. But one of the things I really liked about ESPN prior to the repeal is, some guys would talk about it, like Scott Van Pelt. He would always bring it up on his radio show. I would love that. And he has a history of sports betting. He's told on the radio, and the pitfalls of it and the good part of it. The fun part of winning. But I actually really enjoy that you were getting a little bit of it, but now it's awesome because now you see it on the ticker at the bottom. Raiders -7. Over under 49, and even take it a step further. Now I know this was on another network, but XFL, my goodness, like the way they were doing sports betting content on the XFL, it's a shame that they shut down.
And that was us, because we were partners with the XFL, and the XFL and us, when we were talking it, and even Fox said, hey, we want to make this different. We're like, well, we're doing this at ESPN, let's do it on the broadcast. And as far as we've gone with sports betting, we're still never able to integrate it into the telecast. Like, you'll see it on SportsCenter, you'll see it on SVP, you'll see it on the radio, the bottom line. You're not going to see it during an NBA game, and you're not going to see it during a Major League Baseball game. The XFL said, we were formed after PASPA was overturned, new contract, new rules, and they were completely open to doing it. So me and one of my colleagues that oversees Daily Wager, we went down to Stanford and met with the XFL.
Wow.
6 months before it started. We said, hey, this is what we can provide. This is what we should do. It started in the first week with them showing the point spreads and showing the stuff. And then we actually had Caesars come to Bristol before week 2 just for meetings. We were all sitting in a room, and I'm like, hey, one day, maybe next year or the year after, I would love to have live information, live betting on, like, the actual live line.
Sure.
And Caesars guy goes, we have that now. You want it? I'm like, yeah, we want it. And boom, boom, boom. Week 2, we're showing live betting on air. It's great.
It's amazing. And especially like, let's say the team goes over the total. The next thing you know, it highlights on the TV, like, Roughnecks versus the Battlehawks over 48, and it highlights, gone over. Like, this is beautiful. I don't have to go back and forth. It's amazing.
I was told by people who love football, who have no knowledge whatsoever of gambling, that very first XFL game, they tuned in because it was XFL. And then it was a game that wasn't that close. And then in the second half, they only stuck around because of the gambling. And they were just curious. They didn't have a bet on it. They were curious because it kept popping up on the screen, and that, the over-under was coming down to the wire, and they were curious of what was going to happen. And that was their first experience into sports betting, was watching that XFL game. And, and you had mentioned Scott Van Pelt earlier, and let's be honest. I could sit there all day and pitch and pitch and pitch and pitch and say we should be doing this. Without someone like Scott to go out there and actually do it on his radio show back in the day, and stay it on SportsCenter and Bad Beats and all that. Like, he embraced it. He was allowed to do it. They pushed the envelope a little bit. And when PASPA was repealed, and we're like, hey, let's go do all this, we had already a proven system with Scott talking about it every single night, because they allowed him to do it, the late night show, midnight, etc., that it was proven that people really liked at least talking about it. And, you know, there's a lot of people who you would see it as a tongue-in-cheek, or maybe Scotty would mention it, but you wouldn't see graphics on the bottom line. You wouldn't see full-screen graphics on SportsCenter. Right. That's where the difference is now. And there's a lot of people who love the content that now can actually talk about it without it being taboo.
Taboo. I love it. And I know, Joe, you do too. It's the future. I can't wait for other networks, or not networks, but like other programming to take over, like NBA or, you know, even the NFL for that matter. It seems like everybody's kind of like waiting to see what everyone else is doing there.
Yeah, they're getting there, and you know, there's more to it than that with the leagues and their share. And here, the thing is, every league already has a deal done, like our NFL deal, our NBA deal. So those deals have already been written. This past NFL season, you know, give credit to our NFL, our programming people for going back to the NFL and saying, hey, we've had this show on the air now for 6 months in Daily Wager. We'd love to show highlights with gambling, which was not allowed, and use logos, which wasn't allowed. We're not going to put it in our Monday Night broadcast. We would like to at least do it on the Daily Wager, and the NFL was open to it, you know, a couple times a week on SportsCenter, but you're not going to see it full-fledged until those leagues get their cut. And that, you know, it's a business. And you mentioned earlier, like, it is a business, and we now have a deal. It's a business. We're looking to further the business. There is money to be made, and that's why every single state is falling in line, because there is a lot of money in sports betting, as you guys both know. Yeah, and you're able to monetize it, but at the same time, you're able to produce, in my world, awesome content. Yes. That and I'm a storyteller. That's what I always tell people. Don't be worried about whether it's gambling or not. If you were to go tell me that Tom Brady is 9-1 all time in New England versus the Dolphins, great stat. If you were to tell me he's 2-8 against the spread, also a great stat. Like, it's a stat either way you look at it. Just understand the lingo and go.
So I got a question about the stats part of it, because you were a stats researcher. Is that correct?
Correct.
And like, so what does that entail? So are you just coming up with ideas? Like, so like as far as the show goes, like SportsCenter or any other show, you're like, okay, we're going to talk about this. So is it up to you to figure out just some stats that they can throw up on the screen like that? And
yeah, the easiest way to sell it is that every single show on the network has a researcher assigned to it, whether it's Baseball Tonight, NFL Live, SportsCenter, Get Up, Wingo and Golick. Every show has a researcher. And there are meetings, you know, for the later shows, there's meetings during the day. And for the early shows, there may be meetings the night before or really early in the morning. Every show has a meeting, and the producers and the talent and the researchers all go to it. And some meetings are easier than others when, all right, this is the 6 o'clock SportsCenter, and this is what we're going to talk about, and this is the stats we want behind it. Do you have any ideas, yada, yada, yada. And others are, well, the games are on from 7 to 10 and 10 to 12, and we're going to come on at 11, right in the middle of, you know, an NFL wildcard game or right after an NBA game. And that's a little different because you got to react to the game that you don't know what's going to happen. LeBron's playing, so you have a whole bunch of LeBron stuff ready, but you don't know if he's going to go 2 for 20 or if he's going to have a triple-double. And, you know, where the stats department comes in is we have databases upon databases of information. We have storylines, we have straight stats, we have advanced stats, analytics, win probability, all sorts of video analysis is part of our stats department, where they can watch the video and say, okay, it's the box score is easy to tell you LeBron had 29 and 12. But did you know that 24 of his 29 was against ISO or pick and roll or from the left side off the left hand? We have people watching the video, giving that to us, where we then give it to the talent, the producers. So anytime you're watching SportsCenter or NFL Live or any of the shows, if you see stats up on the screen, it's coming through the stats department or a researcher. If you see the anchor or the talent spinning out information, they have shot sheets along with information, and you're sitting right there with them as well. And that's in Bristol and on the road as well.
Joe, that sounds like a dream. Like, just to be able to get our hands on that kind of information. Like, it might be too much information, but it sounds awesome.
Well, just adding to that, Dave, isn't that what, going back to the contracts with the NFL, isn't that why, like, the NBA is, you know, obviously wants to share all, because they have a lot of stats, obviously, like the NBA, NFL, and that's all proprietary for them. So is that why they want their cut? Because, hey, we got this huge database already. You want some of it, it's going to cost you X amount. I mean, is that why the partnerships are going to come into place in the future?
There's a little bit of the stats angle and the betting angle. Let's take a smaller one like the NHL. The
Okay.
NHL has their own advanced stats department where they have tracking the puck and tracking
Yeah.
movement with cameras, and they were building that for advanced stats. You
Yes.
now can use that in gambling, where you
Sure.
can actually come up with live betting based on that. So if you're going to use their proprietary information for live betting, they're going to want you to pay to use the proprietary information.
There you
In
go.
the
Yep.
NFL, there's the NFL Next Gen stats that you'll see on the
Yep.
CBS and ESPN and ABC broadcast, where they have Next Gen stuff that now is measuring a lot of different analytical levels that may or may not be able to be bet on down the line. If you know that a guy is tired, you may bet a certain way, and that stuff can, they're going to want to pay for that. And
Yeah.
a lot of also the thing beyond the stats is the fees. If you're able to sit there during an NBA game and live bet possession by possession, you're betting on a app or a betting, one of your betting apps that has live data streams coming in. And where are those live data streams coming from? The league. So if the league is providing the book a feed that is now allowing them to book live betting, they're going to want a cut of it. Not my decision to make, but that's where the league come from.
Is it also a point of, hey, we like to use the stats and research department to maybe trigger and maybe regulate to make sure that there's no, point shaving or any kind of,
Sure.
nefarious.
That would be the other side of them wanting, some of the money because of the fact that they are spending a lot of money and ensuring that the data integrity. That's why people have coined it, quote unquote, an integrity fee.
Yeah,
that they are spending money making sure that the information that's going out is appropriate and it's not being, stolen, or it's not having any sort of back end stuff going on. And that's a battle for the books, the data providers, and the leagues to fight out. In my case, I get data. It's in databases. We have content. Most of my content is surrounding pregame stuff for now, where if you have a UFC fight next Saturday night, we're going to have a column on Thursday where we're going to ask somebody to write a column and make the picks. Here are the picks. ESPN Plus, go get it. Go pay for it. And analysis after the fight and all that stuff. So I'll let the business side of integrity fees and leagues and data companies fight that out as long as we're getting the data and we're providing content.
Sure. It's amazing. So where do you feel like this is going to go? Because this is just the beginning, daily wager and the chalk, the digital side. Actually, let's talk about that, and then we'll talk about the future. So tell us a little bit about the chalk and what we can get there once we click on that link there to the chalk.
If you go to ESPN.com/chalk or chalk in the drop down, pre-coronavirus, you were getting obviously every single NBA night. You were getting a couple times a week. You were getting best bet picks. You were getting information that's going on, legislation about of the states that David Purdom is doing, ahead of UFC, ahead of boxing, ahead of during the NFL season. We were doing multiple picks columns on the NFL, as well as Stanford Steve and the Bear was our top column for college football. They would have their picks column. We would have Monday recaps of the weekend and how they did and what you missed. You would also be able to get a Tuesday ATS file that tells you which teams are the best at covering the spread and which teams are struggling against the spread. Basically, you have a Monday through Friday analysis, and then Saturday and Sunday is more game-oriented and reactionary. But it's all covered there in ESPN Chalk. We have a odds comparison tool on there that shows you to shop for the right lines. They're all there on that page. And we're trying to expand and give you more tools. On Chalk, in the scoreboard page, you can go right into Pick Center. And Pick Center is full with betting data and analytical type stuff that can help you make your decision. And then our pride and joy that I mentioned earlier was our best bets columns. No matter the sport, golf, UFC, boxing, NBA, NFL, college football, we have best bets where we have our analysts go in there and tell you what they like and why.
Okay.
And that usually happens a day or two before the game. So Friday for Sunday and Thursday for Saturday. Our UFC card will be out there on Thursday. And that's really what we produce a lot of in sports. And we were just starting to get soccer into it, finding a way to get baseball done. And then here comes the coronavirus. So what we're doing now, if you go now, what you'll see is a lot of we're coming up with ideas to how to keep stuff fresh. So every single July and August, we would do NFL win totals and college football win totals. Yeah. We went to Caesars and said, it's April. nothing going on. Masters is canceled. Baseball is canceled. The NBA is canceled. Can you give us win totals for college football and the NFL? And they're more than happy to do it. So we basically brought August to April. And over the last 2 weeks, we've had NFL win totals, Heisman odds released, college football win totals, college football conference odds, playoff odds. Not to let the cat out of the bag, but we're going to have NFL player props next week. That is something that you can go to our website and see. We're going to have there's player props released way earlier than normal, as well as upcoming features on NFL MVP odds, Coach of the Year, and Rookie of the Year could come out tomorrow. We make the right phone calls. And then basically anything you could bet on football is being done now instead of waiting till August. We'll do it again in August when the odds get updated and we'll have closer to the season, assuming there's football. But we were basically pretending football season's right around the corner and producing all sorts of fun stuff. And, you know, we had a column on what else you can bet on last week with Russian ping pong and calculations. And we had an iRacing column last week that was on there. So if you're into iRacing, that was there. We're trying to do our best to do content when there is no sport. Obviously, it's easier when there's sports, but you know, we're having fun with it. I mean, we spent the entire week last week talking NFL win totals, and it's freaking April. It's great.
So the crazy part about that, Joe, is, I mean, just like in NFL, like if you bet, like if you're like during the game week, if you got to try to beat the number, right? So before the public gets a hold of it, or even the sharps get a hold of it. Well, let's do the same thing on these player props, these future bets, because, I mean, them putting them out so early, there's so much value now. Because, I mean, in my opinion, there is. What do you think?
I completely agree. We were going through that the other day when we did a daily wages show, and we were discussing what the odds are, what the player props are going to be, and they're going to actually tape it next week, so you'll see it in about 10 days. We were talking about how these numbers are different than they might have been in August, and to hop on it now. Same thing with win totals, same thing with college football odds to make the playoff, all that stuff that you normally wouldn't get until July. Hop on it now. I remember when I was out in Vegas meeting with the Caesars folks last July, I thought I had an advantage being there and betting on a whole bunch of college football win totals in July because I beat the market before August came. This is April.
Right.
NFL draft was huge for us. We had a whole bunch of columns and shows around NFL draft props, which we've never done before. And then during the actual live draft, me and one of the other chalk guys were grading the props as the draft was going on. We had a list of them. We graded them as they came in, and then we got information from Caesars that said that hurt us. That didn't hurt us. Tua going 5th was great for us, but Herbert going 6th was awful for us. And we were just live blogging it all night. So stuff that we've never done before, we're now doing because of
that's incredible information there.
Yeah. Just a quick question, Dave. I mean, I guess I think we discussed this privately. I guess today we were talking. Jared was. I guess the elephant in the room is a lot of people had asked me. I get DMs and emails already. Are sports coming back now? Obviously, I'm a betting man, as you know, and I'm sure you are. If I had to make a bet, and I'm gonna make it here on the show, I think sports are going to come back. I don't know how they're going to come back, what logistics will be involved, but I could sure bet that NFL will be back, NBA and MLB and NASCAR, obviously on May 17th, on some level. That's just my bet. I mean,
when you say back when? Back now? Back later? Back?
That's what I'm saying. Back within this year, because I don't think people ask me, Joe, are we done with sports the rest of the year? I don't think so. But again, I'm not going to sit out there and say, oh, they'll be back in July for sure. I just think so many moving parts are involved that it's a fluid situation, especially with the coronavirus. So what do you think?
I think you, and this is not based on any information that I have.
Yeah, of course. We're just
I would spitball that I think the professional leagues who have a obviously high monetary interest stake in coming back.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
With them being their own entities that rely a lot on media, TV, broadcast fees, they can get away with coming back by making their own decisions, whether the NBA goes, and this is just whatever's out there, goes to Disney World, or NHL goes to Montana, or baseball plays somewhere in Arizona, whatever. Yeah. They have a lot better shot at saying, hey, we're going to do this. Maybe no fans, maybe fans, who knows. The colleges is where it gets tricky. And this is by no means do I have any idea what's going to happen. But if the campuses are not open, that makes it a lot harder to tell the student athletes they got to come to campus and play.
Sure.
Yeah.
When the campuses aren't open. Now, that doesn't mean the campuses won't be open. They all might be open. But
exactly.
There are also problems with different parts of the country, whereas I would think with high confidence that the fact that half of the southern states are already open, whether they should be or not, might lead credence to the ACC and the SEC having football in September.
Yeah.
California's not open. I don't know if there'll be football in California and the Pac-12 in September. Now, the SEC came out just before we taped this and said they could see a staggered start to the college football season.
Yeah.
It's just going to be difficult if your campus is not open for you to be able to go play. And we have no control over that. But I would – you're asking about betting. I would bet that in some respects it may not be on time. It may be shortened.
Yes.
It may be different. But I would project that the NFL would – I mean, they hold their draft without any delay.
Yeah. I mean, and they had high ratings, right? It was some of the highest ratings for a draft ever.
And higher rated than any game we would have put on the network that night.
That's
I
insane.
would think that the NFL would come back. Whether you see an end to the NBA and NHL seasons, whether you see a baseball season start, I would bet yes, but you just have no idea. The safest bet was that the Derby wasn't going to be played on May 2nd, and that didn't happen. So, or won't happen.
I believe personally that baseball, NBA will be back in July. But more of a positive attitude, in my opinion. But I live in Texas, and the whole dang state's opening up tomorrow. I mean, movie theaters are open tomorrow, restaurants are open tomorrow. It's like nothing happened. So, and I know it's a slow rollout, and the rest of I know in the Northeast got hammered pretty hard with New York and also with Jersey. How bad is Connecticut hitting?
It's bad. It's related. I mean, we're right there, suburb of New York is what we call it. Southern Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, all got hit hard. So the schools are not open. We're not going to come back as fast as the other states, but like you said, Texas is open. The professional leagues can pretty much, different than the college leagues, move whatever they want. If the NBA decided they wanted to do their playoffs in September, they'll do their playoffs in September. If hockey wanted to do their Stanley Cup finals in October and push the next season to January, they'll do that. You can't really do that in college. You can't just say – there are talks that college football could be in the spring. I don't know. That'd be a hard thing to do.
Well, the rumor, at least from okay, so there's some people I listen to here locally. They say that there's actually one guy that actually works for the Houston Rockets, and he says that the league would prefer to actually move the future seasons, to where they open up around Christmas time. That'd be the open of the NBA season. I mean, they don't really compete with the NFL or the NCAA football. It makes sense to me, and I think I would really enjoy NBA starting in January as opposed to where it is now, which is September, October. So
yeah, they had said that was at the MIT Sloan conference just before the virus got really, really bad. I was actually at that conference when Maury said that they would love to start it in December, January, and end it in August. And this might be the start of that. You never know.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good segue. Getting into baseball, I'm dying to hear his baseball stories. I kind of got a little bit of preview last night with the Sheffield, but I mean, now we're talking about baseball. Can we get some of that baseball? I know you got your Tua jersey on. You're excited about Tua, which I am too.
It's Marino.
No, but it's gonna be Tua's number 13. Remember that? No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, we talked about that, but no, I mean, give us a little bit of your baseball acumen here, because I mean, man, I full disclosure, I'm a big MLB fan. That's my first love growing up. I grew up with Sheffield, Ozzie Smith, Pete Rose. I mean, I love baseball. I bleed baseball. I mean, not that I don't love football. I love all sports, but baseball. And that's why when you were brought up baseball last night, you showed me those memorabilia. I mean, I got excited. It's
all behind me. I did work with the Florida Marlins for a while, and I worked with their AAA and AAA affiliates. I was in Kane County and Albuquerque and in Florida a couple of different times, born and raised down there. So big fan of growing up with the Florida Marlins. And I know they've been through a million different owners and teardowns and World Series and stuff, but happened to have been an intern during both intern for the first World Series. And then I was in Albuquerque on loan back during the playoffs, working for the 2003 World Series team. So it was a lot of fun. Was with that organization off and on for about 10 years before I made the move to ESPN. So a lot of background in baseball. The first 5 years at ESPN, I worked on Baseball Tonight with the guys, Crucky and Ravage and you know, Timmy K, who's the best in the business.
Timmy K, yeah, he's awesome.
Baseball is, you know, the only day I missed at 4 years of high school was from Marlins opening day. So first ever game. 1993. So I was a kid growing up at spring training, seeing your Dodgers in Vero Beach and the Mets in Port St. Lucie, the damn Yankees in Fort Lauderdale, like down the street from my house. You know, growing up with that, we still never had a team. I had to go all the way to Atlanta to see Dale Murphy and the crappy Braves play.
hey, but Ted Turner owned him back then, so they weren't that bad.
So eventually there was a team in South Florida, and we fell in love with it. And I eventually got the honor to work for them for many years. Obviously, you've heard tons and tons of bad things about the ownerships and stuff, but hey, to me, it was a kid, grew up in baseball, working in baseball. I loved every minute of it, and yeah, we'll always miss working in baseball, but obviously I love what I do now.
That's a dream come true right there.
Yeah.
You're a Florida boy, and so you went to the University of Florida.
University of Florida.
Yeah, and you were there for their first national championship in football. Is that correct?
1996, my freshman year. Yes.
Joe, this guy has championship all over him, man. I mean, so you were there for both Marlins. I mean, let's be real. The Marlins,
both and only.
Yeah, it's not like they win a lot of games.
Lost.
They don't have a lot of winning seasons here, but I mean, you were there for both of the World Series. You were there for the Florida National Championship with Coach Spurrier, what Danny Warfel was the quarterback. Is that correct?
Yep, Danny Warfel, Heisman Trophy winning quarterback.
The pride of the New Orleans Saints.
Correct.
And let's see here.
So what are you saying? He's going to be here for Miami's Super Bowl run? Is that what you're saying now? Are we?
That is the one thing that I'm missing. Like the Dolphins, when I was a kid, there was nothing besides the Dolphins. The Marlins didn't come until I was 15. The Heat not until I was 10. The Panthers.
Yeah. But you have to work for them. That's the only way it works. Is if you work for the Dolphins, then they win the championship.
I said the only way I would leave baseball or ESPN is if the Dolphins hired me, and now would be a good time. I did grow up around them. They were a good team when I had as a kid, and it wasn't until I left that they were what they are now. But yeah, Marlins. I mean, you look around my cave. There's a lot of World Series and national championship stuff with the basketball teams and football teams. Have some good teams I root for, but yeah, I'm missing that Dolphins one.
Yeah.
So, can you tell me the story? Tell everybody the story about when a player was looking up in the stands and he noticed something wrong. Tell us that story because that's pretty hilarious.
I had even money that was going to come up.
Do you already know the story, Joe?
No.
Okay.
I know what you're talking about. But
this is a classic.
I told it on VSiNs. That's where you probably heard it. I was up in the press box before a game in Albuquerque. I'm not going to say who, what, when, and where.
Oh, come on.
Leave the innocent out.
I got a phone call up in the press box. One of my players said, "Hey, come down to the dugout. I got an emergency." It was our first year there, so the different side story is they built this brand new stadium and forgot to put the bullpens in. So the bullpen pitchers actually were in the dugout all game, and they would go warm up with a player watching to make sure they didn't get drilled by a foul ball. So I go down to the dugout, still about a minute before the game starts. One of my players, white as a ghost. What happened? Poisoning? What's wrong with you? He goes, look up into the third row, and I look up, and I'm like, what am I looking at? He goes, my girlfriend and my wife are sitting next to each other. And I look at him, I go, you're a freaking idiot. He goes, fix it. You're the PR guy, fix it. I'm like, I'm not a babysitter. But I did my due diligence, taking care of the players as, PR guy is a glorified media guy and babysitter. And I went up there and I knew the wife and I moved her to a different section of the stadium. And afterwards, when I saw the player, I'm like, how did you possibly screw this up? And he put on the ticket request form in the clubhouse, his name, 2 tickets, his girlfriend's name, 2 tickets. They were underneath each other. And the ticket guy said, oh, these 2 are in the same family. Put them together. So the guy's girlfriend and his wife were sitting next to each other and chatting away, too, by the way. The 2 of them were having a great conversation.
Oh, no way. So yeah. I'm assuming they never realized who they were, though, as far as you know.
Not at the time. There were no blows being thrown. And as far as I know, he was still married the next day. So.
Oh, man. Man, I can't even imagine what he's going through. Like looking up there, he's like terrified.
I mean, we could fill 3 hours of baseball stories, but that was one of the top ones, and that came out because one of my friends who works in Asheville, came out with, "Hey, this is the coronavirus. We're missing baseball. We're all bored. For those who worked in baseball, give me your 2 best stories of working in baseball." And that was one of the better ones I could come up with at the time off the top of my head. And having no idea that the next day, the morning show on VEASAN was going to ask me about it, because they probably read it on my Twitter profile and he brought it up. So I told the whole story on VEASAN, and there you go.
All right. So you got another one for us?
The other one that I put out there was not nearly as colorful, but my first day working in baseball, period, I was in single A working in Chicago, and I was in the Midwest, and I'm a South Florida kid with Northeast roots, and you got to do what you got to do in minor league baseball. So I was wrapping hot dogs and working the concession stand, and a person walks up and says, "Hey, can I have a pop?" So I said, "Sure." And I grabbed some popcorn and gave it to them. They wanted a soda pop, and they let me know what they thought of my decision to give them popcorn.
Yeah, you're obviously not from up north, because I grew up north. That's what they call it, a pop. So.
Yeah, it was a pop. I had no idea, so I gave them popcorn. I mean,
that's funny.
I was a sprinter in high school, so there was one day we were pulling tarp. I don't even remember what city it was in. We were pulling tarp, and I wasn't the biggest dude in the world, so I was kind of falling behind the people running tarp, and I slipped and fell underneath the tarp, which is where people go to die or to get on the blooper reels. And I go down, and it's not like everybody stops. It's pouring rain. Everybody continues going, and my phone and my walkie-talkie both fell off, and somehow, someone was looking out for me upstairs. I grabbed my phone, I'm still under the tarp. Walkie-talkie, got into my sprinter stance, and flew out from underneath.
Wow.
I was filled with mud, but I didn't die.
It's almost kind of terrifying.
It was very terrifying.
Yeah.
They teach you when you start rolling tarp never to fall underneath it, and I fell underneath it.
Oh, if I fall under there, I'm just staying under there. There's no way I'm getting up.
That's funny.
That's awesome. So I guess the thing is you went from Florida to the Marlins, and then you went to New Mexico, the Isotopes, whatever an isotope is. And you actually had a good story about how the Isotopes became the Isotopes.
They were the Albuquerque Dukes, as Joe knows, since he's a big Dodgers fan. And the Dukes left after 30, 40 years and moved to, I believe it was Portland. And then Albuquerque didn't have a team for about 3 years. And the Calgary Cannons were moving, and Albuquerque bought them, moved them down there. It was the Florida Marlins affiliate, which is where my connection comes in. Mm-hmm. And they moved to Albuquerque, and they were going to be a brand new team and a brand new stadium with a brand new name. And the Isotopes came as it was part of a naming contest that the paper ran, but it came from the fact that if you're a Simpsons fan, the Springfield Isotopes were going to be moved to Albuquerque, and Homer found out, went on a hunger strike, and he opens up his boss's door and sees the Albuquerque Isotopes and says, "Albuquerque Isotopes." We played that clip 1,000 times. That's what won. And if you also add the fact that New Mexico and Albuquerque is a lot of labs out there and nuclear fission type stuff, and isotopes is a actual scientific term in terms of the nuclear world. So it was actually a perfect fit, and because it was so unique and the colors, and it was the top selling merchandise for many, many years. That was an easier PR story to tell.
Do they have a bunch of Simpsons paraphernalia all over the place?
They do now. When I was there, they didn't, because Fox wouldn't let us.
Oh, wow.
My former boss, who's still there now, the president and GM of the team, he had found that Fox was eventually getting rid of one of their studios. And they were getting rid of all these large sculptures of Marge and Bart and Homer. So he said, "I would like those." And they said, "You can have them. You got to come get them." So he rented a U-Haul, drove from Albuquerque to L.A., put them in the back, and drove back. And now they're all over the stadium. When I went back, because my in-laws still live, that's where I met my wife and everything. And my wife was selling Dippin' Dots on the concourse. That's how I met her. But
oh, wow.
She's from there, and so every time we go back, we go to a game, and there's my kids sit right on Marge and Homer and Bart, and they have a ball.
That's awesome. Wow. So with that team, then you're saying that the Marlins, so they were a Marlins
AAA.
AAA affiliate, But the Marlins win or go to the World Series that year, so you get to go back to Miami.
Yeah, so I had been with the Marlins in '02 as their PR intern before getting the job as the PR director at the Albuquerque team, the AAA team. Albuquerque season was over. We made the playoffs and did our little run, and then I went back home to see my family in Florida. I was there as a former employee, enjoying it and watching them clinch a wild card berth. And then my former boss says, "Hey, do you want to help out?" So I said, "Let me clear it with my Albuquerque boss," and they let me fly back and forth every week, and was there basically as a PR assistant during the whole run, beating the Giants, beating the Cubs, and beating the Yankees. So I was there the entire time. It was whenever you go to an event like the World Series, they run out of room for the media, so they put you in the auxiliary media, which in this case was right field, and my job was to oversee the auxiliary media. That's where I was. I was in right field. So.
That's awesome. So, Joe, if you remember, I'm pretty sure wasn't that the Bearman deal with the Cubs?
Bearman was the Cubs in Chicago.
Cubs. Yeah, I remember that game. Yeah, that was very controversial. Stuck his hand out, or that was not. It was not meant for the Cubbies that year.
Yeah. And then after he dropped that, they then walked the batter, and then there was a ground ball that was booted, and double, and another error, and a walk, and a hit, and a double. So the Cubs had plenty of chances. And by the way, they led in Game 7 as well after Kerry Wood hit a home run. So they can blame Bartman all he wants. Like, I send him a Hanukkah card every year. Hopefully he gets it. The Cubs had plenty of chances.
Yeah, what about the series with the Yankees? So that was you guys were huge underdogs. I mean,
that team was underdogs from the very, very beginning, and no one expected them to win the World Series. And everybody saw the Yankees beat the Red Sox in 7, the whole Pedro game, which they showed the other night on TV.
Yeah.
And, at that point, I don't like the term, but if you're going to use it, use it. We were playing with house money. Right. That's what it was. And Miguel Cabrera, 20 years old, gets knocked down by Roger Clemens, then hits a home run. Alex Gonzalez with a walk-off in Game 4, and David Wells getting injured, and then Josh Beckett just.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that series.
So I got a 2003 Florida Marlins trivia question.
Uh-oh.
Who was the highest paid player on the roster? Because if you remember, they always touted the fact that the Marlins didn't spend a lot of money. They were up against the Yankees, which spent too much money. But you had this team of really good young players.
Well, most of those players were actually gotten in trades from the '97 dismantling, or for the fact that they were so bad. Like a Josh Beckett was a draft pick, and Dontrell Willis was a draft pick, and all those guys were still young, and they're second. Beckett was 01, 02, so he was still new. Luis Castillo, he probably wasn't highly paid as a second baseman.
I can give you a hint. This guy's a Hall of Famer.
Hall of Famer, highest paid player.
Wow, for the Marlins in 2003?
Yep.
I know Pudge Rodriguez, probably, right?
That's it. Pudge Rodriguez.
Yeah. one year, $10 million deal, right?
Yeah. That's living a good life right there.
1 year, $10 million, won the World Series, and then took a paycheck the next year with the Rangers.
Yeah, the Rangers.
Yeah.
And then he came over to my Astros for a little bit. And then I think then he went back to the Rangers, I believe.
The great thing about those teams is not only were they underdogs and Cinderella stories, 97 and 03, but I'm biased, but having been there, they were great guys. Like Sheffield, we talked about, was a great guy. And, I had been with Miggy Cabrera back in Single A, and I had seen, I knew Jeff Conine was on both teams. Josh Beckett came up through the minor leagues. I had seen him in Single A as well. They were just, good guys. Not every one of these athletes is a good guy. And, when you have guys like Al Leiter, who's now a broadcaster, and they're just good dudes. It's 2 fun teams.
Yeah, and I think Gary Sheffield, for the most part, he's kind of I think he was portrayed sometimes as not such a good dude, mainly when he went to the Yankees. But the thing is, you just don't know. But the public doesn't know those things.
No, and then the media portrays players how they want to portray them, and sometimes Chef wasn't friendly with the media, or he did kind of stupid things that got caught. And my experiences with Chef was great. I knew him as a college kid. I was a freshman. I was a sophomore in college. He's a guy who passed up college to go pro and went to the minors, and then became, to me, is a Hall of Fame type player. And he would ask me all the time. I was a 19-year-old kid who was just walking around the clubhouse and giving out stats and asking the players if they needed anything. And, hey, how's school, man? how's college? Give me a good story at Florida. Give me something. How are the girls? Like, so, you know, they want to know how the University of Florida was. And it was just, they were good dudes. And, you know, I don't tell the story often, and I'll leave a lot of the details out. But like when I was back there in 2002, I was hanging out, and someone found out it was my birthday, and Derek Lee said, "Hey, dude, we're going to this club tonight. Why don't you meet us there?" I'm like, "Yeah, right, whatever." Me and my buddies went out, and he said, "Hey, I'll be at this club at a certain time." And all he did was get us in, get us behind the rope, hand me a bottle of vodka and a bottle of rum, and said, "Happy birthday, go have fun." And here's me and my brother and a whole bunch of friends from college. I'm an intern with the Marlins, and they take care of you. They're ball players that make millions of dollars. Like, nobody knows who Derek Lee is. One of the nicest guys I've ever met. So they're good dudes.
That's incredible.
Well, just adding to that, I mean, that brings up a point. I was talking to a buddy of mine. Do you think now the league, I mean, I don't know how much interaction you have like with the league or with the Marlins. Do you now think those stories back then are just so good to hear because players back then weren't really scared of being on Instagram, Twitter, like they could be free, so to speak. I mean, imagine now if a Ken Griffey Jr. would be around this, Instagram era, a Pete Rose, they'd be crucified.
It's a different world. Like I can't imagine back then, like, you know, it's not like I got a text message to be at a certain place at a certain time, and then I got like, you know, we Instagrammed ourselves it was meet me at the back door at this time. I get in, and you know, it was just fun. It was good. It wasn't on social media, and it's a completely different world.
So do you think that's why players are a little bit more now isolated, I guess, or less nicer, for lack of a better word, like you said? You know, there's no more leads around.
Do you think that a player's wife and girlfriend would be able to sit next to each other and not know who each other are after
exactly.
Twitter and Instagram?
Yeah, no, that's impossible.
Right.
Yeah, and not only that, but the media, man, they're looking for a story all the time. They're looking for clicks. So they're going to vilify somebody or lift somebody up over here, but, you know, lifting somebody up, it doesn't get as many clicks as vilifying somebody. So, you know, I can see why everybody wants to jump on my poor Astros for breaking the rules. I mean,
you got caught.
It was just a little rule. I mean, it's not a big deal. You know, no, I'm kidding. But I mean, hey, that's the one good thing about coronavirus. Maybe this whole thing was going to blow over when we get back to baseball. They're not going to talk so much trash about the Astros anymore.
Probably don't like the ESPN column that was out today. It was one question you debated on all the teams, and the Astros one was it tainted. So this is the way I look at it. You did bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, you were the last team standing. You shouldn't have done what you did. Like, I'm not saying you should get away with it and you should have penalties, and I would understand if they stripped the title, although that would be unprecedented considering everything else that's gone on over time. I mean, how about the team that had steroids? You stripped them as well, but you did win, and I don't know which play and if things would have been different if you wouldn't have won.
Sure.
You personally, whether they cheated or not, you personally had a year where your favorite team won it all. They can't take that away from you. It may be tainted. There may be an asterisk on it. At the same time, like, I was there in '97 when the Marlins bought the World Series and they dismantled the next year.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Buying it, not buying it, dismantling, whatever you want to say, you can't take the memories away. And your team won the World Series. Your team continuously gets rid of the World Series somehow, some way. But is what it is.
Yeah, especially during that year, we had Hurricane Harvey hit our area, and that was pretty much all. I mean, we got flooded in our own house, and it was the only thing that we had to look forward to. So, no, it's not tainted in my eyes, but that's more me being a fan than anything. I'm sure if I'm Joe over there, you know, I'm sure Joe's pissed off more than anybody. He's got the Dodgers. The Dodgers have been screwed over between the Astros and allegedly the Red Sox. So, I mean, I can understand where Joe might be coming from.
Yeah, it's okay.
You also may not want to put Kershaw out back. We won't even do it.
Hey,
cheating or not, he got lit up like a Christmas tree. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. You're right. Dodgers had many chances. I mean, but there's, I mean, look at you. I mean, like I said, I still like the Marlins. I mean, every time, Jared knows, every time we'd be betting and stuff, I'd root for the underdog because the Marlins, no one ever never gives them a chance when they play the mighty Nats, whoever. I mean, yeah, they're horrible, but, I mean, it's just you got to root for the Marlins. I mean, same thing with Tampa. I don't know how you feel about Tampa Bay. That's another Florida team, but are you a fan of them at all or not, or what they're doing with their ball?
There's really no ill will. It's almost too unfortunately franchises that don't draw well and they try to make the Citrus series, but
Yeah.
it is what it is. And I'm with you. I like when teams that are low budget teams are able to do what the A's do and the Rays do, and pretty much the Marlins have always done with a low budget. So I like seeing that, and I have no problem with the Rays winning. It's not like the Bucks, who obviously I didn't like before, and I'm not going to like now with Brady. But
no, that's right.
Hey, at least Brady's out of the division now, so that's got to help.
For years, people would ask me, what do the Dolphins have to do to win? And I would say, move divisions. So,
yeah, man. So,
they're going to win this year, though.
So, I guess you went from a media relations director, right? Is that correct? With New Mexico. How does that parlay into a career at ESPN? I mean, because that's awesome. Everybody, I mean, I would love, like, I think a lot of sports fans would love to be able just to be a part of the sports leader, and you're living that life. So how did that even happen?
Well, I was a stats guy. I had done stats for the Marlins and other jobs. I'd always been a stats guy and pitching and telling stories, the media guy in Albuquerque. And the way it happened was Oklahoma City Redhawks were in town, and their pitching coach was John Wetland.
Okay.
ESPN was trying to do a story on John Wetland. I don't even remember what the story was. And when they were back in Oklahoma City, they couldn't the PR staff there, for whatever reason, wasn't getting back to them. So they reached out to me and said, hey, can you set us up if we come to Albuquerque and do an interview with John Wetland? And I'm like, that's my job. I'm the PR guy. So I set the whole thing up, and they did 2 days interviews with Wetland for whatever ESPN documentary they were doing. And when we were all done, and the guy was, Bob Holtzman was the reporter, and he's like, hey, if I can ever do anything for you, let me know. And I said, here's my resume. Give it to someone in Bristol. And I don't know, 6 months goes by, and I get a random phone call that says, hey, we'd like you to, your resume was on our desk. We see your background. You work in baseball. You have a few minutes to talk. And I did what amounted to a on the phone trivia contest, a whole bunch of trivia tests, answered all the questions to the best of my knowledge, and then hung up and didn't hear from the guy again for another year.
Oh my goodness.
Called me back a year later and said, hey, we now have an opening. We spoke with you about a year ago. You passed the test. Now let's go to the next step. And then there was the written test, and there were about 4 tests I went through before I got to Bristol for an interview, and it was in the middle of the 05.
Unbelievable.
The regionals were in Albuquerque. It was the Albuquerque regionals, so I did a game one day with the Lobos and flew to Bristol and came back, and then I got a job as a production researcher with stats. So that's kind of how it happened, and my resume was given to someone, and I passed the test, and a year later they hired me. So it took about 18 months from when I interviewed until I got the job.
Yeah, that on the phone test, trivia test, like you'd almost think that you had to fail it if you haven't heard from the guy for like a year. You're almost like, forget it, I'm moving on.
Yeah, I had no clue what I had gotten. I had gotten the random phone call. It was, hey, this is so-and-so from ESPN. Your resume was passed over to me. Do you have a few minutes? And it was, give me the top 10 rushers of all time. Can you name me the Heisman Trophy winner of 1980, whatever? And on and on and on. And I thought I did pretty well. And yeah, I didn't hear from the guy for a while. And evidently there was no opening at the time. And then he was just going through resumes. And then I scored pretty high. So they called me back.
So this is like a dream position then.
Yes.
All circling all the way back from the beginning. Like, so, I mean, just going forward, I mean, I think that going forward, there's going to be so much content as more and more states open up. I'm hoping Texas opens up their laws. It seems like they want to drag their feet on everything, but yeah. So the future of sports betting, there's no doubt.
Yeah, I'm hoping that as this continues to grow and get more and more infrastructure, that at some point down the line we can talk about having second screen experiences. Like, right now VSiN does the BetCast. We would like to do something that on a ESPN Plus or ESPN2 one day. Who knows, whether there's a game on our air and then another channel, you're able to do it with betting information.
Yeah.
All pipe dream down the line, you're going to need to have that live information. What you saw in the XFL broadcasts, I would love to bring to our side of things. Don't know, that would take more contract negotiations and everything, but thinking about ways to move the betting landscape to in-game betting and win probabilities and broadcast environments would be next steps that may not be for another 3 to 5 years.
Right.
But we're all thinking in how to advance the fact that most of our stuff now is pregame. Here's the numbers, here's the information, here's the percent chances, win probability, FPI, here's the ATS, here's this and that and this and that. It's mostly pregame. Yeah. One day it's going to be in game.
Well, don't you? Sorry, no. I mean, isn't it in Europe? If I'm not mistaken, at soccer games they could bet actually in game with like tablets. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I mean,
tennis,
so
soccer.
That's like awesome. But in Europe, he says he goes to Manchester United games. He has a tablet and he'll sit there and get watch the game or whatever, and just bet live.
I was in London at a conference during the Super Bowl, and I was able to live bet the Super Bowl legally. Yeah. In London because it's legal out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
In game legally on a live app, whereas opposed to we're 50 different states with 50 different apps and 50 different rules, where you're out there and you can go in London and bet, and you can go here and bet. And it's a different world, but they've also been doing it for a whole lot longer than 2 years. Sure. I mean, we're 18 days away from the 2-year anniversary of the repeal. It's only been 2 years.
Yeah. It's
if you look at you're looking at 100 weeks ago, there was one state that had legal sports betting. So
incredible story, man. And I mean, just looking forward. Now we just need sports. I mean, because the Russian ping pong is not going to cut it.
You can only bet so many Madden Sims and Russian ping pongs, and I tried to, Argentinian basketball and Belarus soccer is only going to take you so far.
Yeah, I'm 1 for 1 on Madden Sims and. Not gonna do it anymore. It's like there's no real handicapping that stuff.
No, I went 4-1 one night, and I said, "All right, I'll cash in. I'm done."
Yeah, it was. I remember the game. It was the Ravens versus the Patriots, and I remember telling Joe actually on the air. I said, "Well, I'm going to take the Ravens because I saw what happened in the regular season." The thing is, that's not a way to handicap it. It's just.
There's no stats behind that. It's flip a coin.
One though.
It's you're right though. You can't do anything, but sports are good.
iRacing, esports, there's so many different things that we never even talk about. Like it's out there. So.
All right.
Well, Dave, just one last question. What are your I guess again is like what are your meetings now? If you could share a little bit, like. At the network when there's nothing going on, like what do the executives say? Like, hey guys, let's keep it fresh. Let's take some time off.
Let's pump up the Last Dance. Like
what do you guys talk? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like,
you're gonna think I'm making this up, but like this past April was probably as busy as I've ever been.
Really?
Because we were making April look like August. We were doing the NFL win totals and the NBA the college football win totals and the Heisman. So we had about 12 days of content in a row where it was nonstop that we wouldn't have done until August. We would have worried about the Masters and the NCAA tournament was over. And April, outside of the Masters and baseball starting, is fairly quiet.
Yeah, you're right.
April became our August where, it'll get a little quieter over the summer when it always is quiet during the summer minus baseball. But we keep it fresh. I mean, I was on the phone with Preston Johnson this morning talking about a feature he's going to do about poker that's coming out since they're still playing poker and online poker seems to be back as opposed to it's gone for 10 years. So that's still going on. Doug Kazarian did a piece a little while ago about, what else is out there with the NFL draft props and the Madden Sims and the iRacing. And he did a piece on that and talked about that on Mina Kimes' daily pod. So, conversations continue. I was on the phone with Caesars earlier today talking about NFL MVP and talking about player props, as I mentioned earlier. So there's always stuff to keep us busy. And before you know it, golf's going to be back and we'll have golf to talk about. It is different than it would normally be. I took over this role last April, and I was trying to – the reason I started in April was because it was the quiet time to learn the job before August comes and it's football.
Right.
Well, that – April was not the same April this year because we were trying to stay above. So
and I don't think we'll ever have another time like this in our life. Hopefully, we'll never have another time like this. Once this is over, we're going to be back to normal, back to business. And
you mentioned the Last Dance. We've had a piece already out on the Last Dance in terms of what the ATS numbers for the Bulls were back then and how bookmakers couldn't keep up. David Purdom wrote a great piece, and we're gonna have another one next Monday or Tuesday as soon as the Last Dance airs on Sunday, we're going to have a piece related to what happened in Sunday's episodes, which I can't tell you, but we will have a piece talking about that. So we have a lot of good stuff out there. The NFL draft was, 10 days worth of content. So will stuff slow down? Sure. May and June and July without sports, they're slow to begin with.
Sure.
Yeah.
There was one thing on the 98 Bulls, on what SVP show, the Bad Beats. It showed the there was it was taco night. Did y'all? I'm sure you saw this, David. But
we looked it up for him.
Oh, it was incredible. I was completely engaged in that thing. And how did the Bulls give up such a big lead when they're trying to score and there's only like 45 seconds left? Joe, the Bulls were a -7.5 favorite in 98. But they're blowing out. I can't remember who they were playing, but
they were up like 16.
Yeah, 16 points with like 45 seconds left. And the thing is they needed 110 points for everybody in the stadium to get tacos. But so the Bulls are actually trying to score, which is unlike sometimes what will happen now, where they'll just try to go through the motions. And they still gave up the lead, and mainly because Steve Kerr can't defend a 3-throw jump shot. That was basically what did him in.
And basically how that works is one of the researchers that works on Daily Wager and other shows, he has the gambling background, and we're doing all this about The Last Dance, and he came up with the idea to go through box scores and find out what games may or may not have been bad beats, and he found about a half a dozen, and Van Pelt obviously can take that and make it as fun as it was, and we're probably going to do a piece on it, and that's content that Last Dance wasn't even supposed to air now. It wasn't supposed to air until the summer. So
yeah, great stuff. So David, do you have a Twitter account you'd like to rep?
Sure, it's D Bearman, Bearman, ESPN. So it's at D Bearman ESPN would be the Twitter account.
All right, everybody need to go follow David, and we'd hope to have you on again in the future, especially when we get sports back, so we can
be fun.
So we can definitely see where sports betting, at least for the content side of things, is going. But you guys are doing a great job, and please continue to do what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, of course, it's easier when there's live sports, and we'll get back into that hopefully in the fall, and we'll go from there. I'd love to be back on again. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Dave. Appreciate it. And we'll see you on Twitter and on ESPN. Now, when are you gonna make an appearance, by the way, on Daily Wager? We need to see you on the camera with Doug Kazarian. No?
Maybe when it comes back on TV.
Yeah, that's good. I'll say, hey, I know Dave there. That's good. Good. Yeah, appreciate all the stuff, David. Awesome.
Thank you, David.
And let's go Miami. Dolphins.